in. So, time to kick off with Ben Betts, CEO of Learning Pool, talking about this journey to extraordinary. And that's not just a casual phrase. That's something which is built into the structure of Ben's entire thesis in this webinar here, and how we get people to improve their skills and how that can improve retention across the organization. I'm going to hand you over now to Ben. Ben, the floor is yours.
Don, thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I think most people on the call sounding like you are from the European end of the world. So good morning to you. Good afternoon if I happen to have missed you out. I shan't go into the weather. We've done plenty of that. Thanks to Don for just introing me there. What I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about my philosophy around this idea of a journey to extraordinary, and try and link it into how L&D is becoming a bigger deal when it comes to company strategy. Beyond that, I'm going to show you a little bit about the skills agenda, which is coming up big in everything that we see at the moment. Ask you a few questions about what it means for your organization, and then show you what we did here at Learning Pool. So whilst we are a vendor of learning technology and learning content, we're also a 400 or 500 person company. And we think that we need to walk the talk here. If we're going to suggest that our customers should be adopting skills in a big way, then we should surely be doing it as well. So I want to show you the results of what we've been doing over the last 6 months or so, and to show you a little bit about how that's gone. So do put questions, chat, observations as we go. There will be a couple of moments for us to come together as a group and talk together and discuss. So hopefully you don't have to listen to me too long. And my aim will be to not take the full time, thus returning you to your normal lives with a little bit of time to spare. A bit about me. My name's Ben. I'm the CEO here at Learning Pool. I've been the CEO here for 18 months or so. Prior to that, I was the CEO at another company called HT2 Labs. I've worked my entire career in learning technology, and I'm quite familiar with all sorts of ends of the scene. Previous to being a CEO, I worked in academia a bit and did my PhD at Warwick University here in the UK, looking at more effective ways we could do e-learning in the corporate world. Learning Pool is my organization. You may have heard of us. We're one of the larger providers in the UK and the USA. We have 9 going on 10 offices around the world. We support some 10 million learners on a day-to-day basis, and nearing 500 employees. We are a full service organization, so we do everything end to end you need. We do the learning platforms, we do content, and we do data. Data is a thesis that you'll hear me talk about a lot, and it's something I'm quite passionate about. So I'll keep referring to data through the time with us today. But before I get to that, let me tell you a little bit about a belief. One of the things that's your job as the CEO of a company like mine is to make sure that everyone's aligned and that they have a shared purpose, a shared vision, something that we pull together around. And this was the kind of my statement, and it underpins today's webinar, as well as my core belief of why I think it's worth being a learning and development professional. I believe that extraordinary things happen when companies invest in their people. If I had $100 to invest in anything in Learning Pool, whether it be a Salesforce plugin or a new coffee machine or whatever, my $100 would always go on investing in people, because that's the only thing, as far as I'm concerned, that could have a limitless return. And throughout my career, investing in either myself or in people around me has been the source of such inspiration, such potential, and such brilliant outcomes that I become incredibly passionate about this idea that it's only really through people that extraordinary stuff occurs. You can get great results from your new coffee machine. The Salesforce widget will be superb, I'm sure, but truly extraordinary, something that changes lives, that changes the nature of a team, that changes the fortunes of your organization, that only comes from people. And I think that's why we get out of bed in the morning. That's why I get out of bed in the morning, because as a L&D professional, I have stories somewhere in my back catalogue about the anecdotes of when we've done something, usually a very small part of something, that has changed somebody's life for the better. And I think that's extraordinary. So hopefully each of you as an L&D professional has a story somewhere in the background. There'll be lots of data, I'm sure. But one of the reasons people stay in the job for me is because every now and again, something incredible happens. You intervene with somebody, you take somebody through an experience that changes their skill set, that gives them a new possibility, that gets them a new job, that gets them a new house, that gets them a new life. these things are absolutely extraordinary, and they're as a result of people learning. And I think we've always known this, but maybe, just maybe recently, our companies are starting to get to know this a little bit more as well. And so my first question for you today is to think about how L&D is seen in the light of strategy. So we're going to switch views a little moment here and try and bring you together to have a sort of a group chat around this question. Can you have a think about this for me? What projects are you a part of today that you can say have a direct impact on your organizational strategy? So, I mean, you might be doing compliance or onboarding or upskilling in some way, but how many of those projects are, directly either implementing a strategy, something you've heard from the top, or perhaps supporting or even directing a new way of doing something? Anybody doing anything today that you think is having a direct impact on organization strategy?
And I'm really interested to get the answer on this, or answers on this. Please put them in that big box underneath the question. What is it that you're doing that you can say is having a direct impact on the organization's strategy? Because increasingly, I believe you're right, we've moved in L&D from being a fulfillment house, and it's not a binary thing, but we're moving towards being involved in directly relating to the organizational strategy. We're in a transition point in the field, I sincerely believe in, and I'm looking forward to having everybody's answers from what they're doing in that box. So we've got Janet saying changes around legislation that will impact our ways of working. That's pretty fundamental. They're flowing in.
That's interesting though, Don. Let me pick you up on that one and Janet there. So you're like changes in legislation that impact our ways of working. This is how do you elevate that from implementation to how you change your business? And we've seen this a couple of times where actually a company's ability to create products or to be compliant or to do those things has a real constraint on when they can release products or make new services or do things like that. So if you have to do that big bang annual cycle of like everybody goes through the sheep dip once a year or something else like that, it actually becomes incredibly limiting on company strategy. You're like, oh, we can't change this. We can't release this new product, or we can't do this new service because we're going to have to take everybody back through data protection, or we're going to have to do everything to do with safeguarding or whatever it is. So if you then, I think that's where I get to in terms of how can you impact strategy, is that idea that actually, if we change this around, so if we move from the big bang, everybody learns this thing at once or goes through the annual process, then actually we can really contribute to strategy, because I'm going to feed back up to the top level and say, actually, we can be much more agile here. You can release something next week because I've got the foundations for how you do that.
That was the first comment, Ben. You jumped straight in. You gave us a very coherent view of it. There are something like, 15 comments now. You're going to spend as much time on each of those comments? Or
we're here for a day and a half, aren't we? We've got a day and a half.
We may have to. I tell you what I'm getting as a common theme across all of these is people shifting. They're talking about things often at a tactical level, but which are absolutely impacting the strategy part of it. And there's a common theme, I think, of change underneath it. So the change might be integration of new employees for Kirsty, because there's an acquisition that's taken place. Alejandri is talking about cultural changes and working more on mental health. Kevin's talking about feeding directly into the big goals of the company. And Lisa just spells it out. There are so many changes in the organization at the moment. And so we've got projects around that. And thank you, by the way, for sharing all these things. There is far more going on here than I would have guessed. But Ben, do you think the change that's taking place in organizations is driving the need for learning and development to step up and be more strategic?
Yeah, absolutely. Because people are, the pace of change, generally speaking, we've heard this endlessly for 10, 20 years, I guess. But, the pace of change is genuinely quickening. And when the way in which we've had to respond over the last 2-3 years has redefined things. And I think companies have come to realize that they are constrained more by the pace at which they can help people through a change, how they can enable people, how they can move skill sets, more than it is any big other decision. So, go back to releasing software and things like that. It's always painful to procure new software and do new things, but the biggest change always comes in enabling people to actually change a process, to do something differently. And so I think if you get to that level of, well, actually, as an L&D professional, my focus is less on what that particular change is, and more that we have a capability to support change at a pace which we didn't have before. And you don't just get that. I think, you have to do some hard yards before the company's going to trust you on that sort of thing. There is some foundational steps here that if you haven't got certain things in place, then why would anybody trust you with the big change project or redefining the way in which they employ people?
We talked about that before, Ben, the need to slog up the foothills before you get to the top of the mountain. But I completely agree. You've got to win your spurs. That's an English phrase. You've got to prove yourself before you can do the rest of it. I'm going to stop talking. I think we probably filled up that chat, which is brilliant. Should we carry on, Ben?
Yeah, why not? Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Do keep thoughts coming in there, and do keep the chat going back in the general chat and observations area there. It's always fascinating to hear what it is people are doing, getting involved in, and I think it's a testament to how diverse this profession is. The sorts of the lengths and depths of the things and people are having to go to all within one profession. It seems outrageous that you have to do all of these things. But that's always one of my favorite things. A bit of a sidetrack is, as an L&D professional, you get to learn really odd things from time to time. My favorite one was always working with the pony club, because then I got to figure out what a menage was. I don't know. I do now. Anyway, I digress. So I think to the conversation there, I think your comments and the sort of the slew that we got there are indicative of this growing ambition, that actually we're being asked to do more things, to get more involved in some of the more strategic elements of our organization's needs than we ever have before. And that increasingly, as we gain in reputation and as things become more complex and the pace of change quickens, organizations are starting to realize that learning and development as a function or as a practice or as a capability is going to become something that helps them redefine what it is they can do as an organization. So I've got this is my idea around the journey to extraordinary. It's not particularly original, but this is the way I think about it. So on the bottom, we think about internal capability. So from where actually L&D has a lack of capability and is generally holding back. So you see lots of things here where people are panic buying because they just can't get things out the door fast enough, to where you're tasked with implementing strategy. So the strategy has been decided somewhere else, and now L&D needs to do it. To when you move forward into supporting strategy, which is when actually you have a seat at the table and you're saying, well, actually, instead of doing this, we could perhaps do this. And that starts to change the way the business works. To when actually you're at the head of that table, and actually a sort of you hear the sort of long fabled sort of learning organization, learning culture, where actually our capabilities in how we advance people and how we change skill sets and how we change behavior actually enable us to do things that others can't do. And I think for me, those sort of step up in how they echo in the marketplace, in how your business is impacted by this. So on the top side there, the external impact, to begin with, it's quite limited. In fact, you may be in that holding back phase. If you are really good at implementing strategy with basic L&D techniques, then you are as good as any of your good competitors would be, but you're probably not better. And beyond them, as we start to see learning and development professionals become more engaged, then we start to see that that's where an organization become better than its competitors in the industry, and then eventually into this idea of redefining. So I think about it in terms of 4 E's. To begin with, you're kind of emerging. We're holding back. Recent adopters of digital learning, they're avoiding making big mistakes, anxious not to put too much resource into this new approach. And the impact on the organization is, well, limited. Beyond that, we're implementing strategy. And so we're starting to think about features and functions that we need in software, in technology, and other capabilities in order to make the strategy happen. It's a support function. L&D is seen as potentially as a cost center in the organization. Therefore, efficiency becomes important because we're actually relying on you getting it done cheaper, faster, rather than anything else. Beyond that, though, we're starting to move into this word engaging, which is often used around our industry and much maligned. But for me, this is about how we're starting to move beyond the idea of just doing things efficiently, and that actually we're getting into more self-directed learning. We're getting into this culture of learning a little bit now, because we're trying to enable people to take more control, to become more personal in their involvement in learning. This gives you more flexibility, gives you an opportunity to respond to change quicker, because you don't necessarily need to deploy that big hit course to everybody, because we've become more picky, more choosy about who does what. And the success of the business is now really based on people exhibiting the right behavior and having the right skills. Beyond that is where I think we've got this fabled land of the extraordinary. that L&D is fully integrated into the business, and that actually the business is consistently gaining competitive difference from its capability to have people learn new things, new behaviors, new skills. And I think it's this area where you start to see organizations that are defined by their commitment to performance and their commitment to people. This is where extraordinary things happen. And I see this as kind of a graphic equalizer more than anything else, if you forgive the phrase. It's very hard to be extraordinary all the time. But what you can do is set the basics in motion that mean it's more likely that extraordinary things can occur. And from time to time, they will. If you've empowered people to learn by themselves, if you have given them the tools and the resources and the reason to bother doing it, then I think you start to see the possibility for more extraordinary things happening. I think it's unlikely that extraordinary outcomes occur from sticking out the 2 hours of compliance training a year. And it's not to besmirch compliance training. Compliance can actually be extraordinary. And that goes exactly back to that first point. I think it was Janet that raised it in the chat. If you have a capability to empower people to do what they need to do, to tell them the behaviors where they're perhaps lacking, where risk lies in the organization, and how you make that personal. So I only need to look at the things I need to look at in order to do my job. Then extraordinary things can happen, because you can release products faster, you can mitigate risk, you can cut costs. These are extraordinary outcomes that could occur from doing that. So it's not about the type of learning it is, it's about the way in which you go about it. So, I think the pressure is on us a little bit here. Increasingly, if you look at the inflationary environment, and whether you consider it the sort of the Great Resignation, the Great Reset, or whatever sort of version of inflation/resignation you look at, increasingly organizations are struggling. And they are struggling to raise wages fast enough. They are struggling to keep pace with change. They are struggling to fill jobs, to keep people in jobs. This is a graph going back a little bit over the last 12 months. Voluntary resignations in the USA, never been tracking higher in history. This little graphic has been doing the rounds on LinkedIn over the last week or so. Thought it was quite interesting. I'll pop it in here. This is the sort of top reasons for quitting previous job over the last 12 months or so. A lack of career development and advancement in the #1 position. I can't remember that. Not that I've seen this graph year on year, but I can't remember that as a thing before. It was always managers #1, pay #2, and then other stuff in every survey I've ever seen before. So this is kind of interesting to me. I start to think about the idea that increasingly people at the top of the businesses are going to be turning to learning and development, because we can't raise wages fast enough. We can't reskill quick enough. We can't hire quick enough. We can't keep people in the business long enough. These are all big L&D problems that have really elevated our game to this next level. And it's at this point that I think we have to think about, well, how are we going to win? How are we going to redefine what we do in order to address these problems? And for me, I think what we're seeing is that people who are those organizations, those learning and development organizations that are putting skills at the center of their business, are looking likely of having the better chance of winning. That is, they're tearing up somewhat what it used to be to have a career path, to understand what it was to be competent in any particular job. And they're taking a skills-based approach to understand what are the skills that are generally in demand in the marketplace for this role. What are the skills that are generally involved in any job across our organization? What are the skills that sit at the heart of our strategy and what it is we want to do better and different? And how can we hyper-focus in on enabling people to get better at those skills that matter most to our business? Companies agree. We did a survey with Ernst & Young earlier in the year. 88% of people that we questioned said that L&D was one of their most important areas of investment in the current period in order to achieve their strategic aims and ambitions. This is real. This is our moment. And actually, there's lots of good little anecdotes around there to see it. So Intercontinental Hotel Group, for example, got a remarkable, extraordinary, you might say, project on we're looking to influence the lives of 30 million people by 2030. Part of that's what they call their Ihg Skills Academy. So this is an online space where anybody around the world can go and train for free in hospitality skills. Now, not only is this bringing people up around the world in terms of what it is they can do, but it's obviously also a recruitment and a data tactic for Ihg itself to understand where people are and helping them to almost onboard themselves and train themselves in a way that would make them easily employable in an IHG environment before they've even opened the door or picked up the phone and thought about getting a job role. This is, a kind of extraordinary, and I think this is indicative of the sorts of initiatives we start to see where people have said, well, actually, we wouldn't have got here if L&D was implementing strategy, because it would have just been this idea of, well, we'll try and onboard people a bit faster, or we'll be more efficient. But where has been seen as a fundamental capability of IHG to do things differently, they've then put that forward and said, well, what happens if we extend our capability as learning and development professionals to people who don't even work for us? I think that's pretty extraordinary. Amazon comes in for a lot of stick on its employment practices, but they're the same as Walmart, Target, and a bunch of other big box stores, especially in the USA, who are now taking to paying full college tuition for frontline employees on any subject. This is getting people into a position where not only have they got a job, but they've got better life prospects. This genuinely does change people's lives. And I think this is an incredibly strong sort of signal that an investment in people, regardless almost of what that skill or that capability is probably worth it, to bring people on side, to make them better, and to ingratiate them with the company a little bit more. I've tried to do this a bit as well. And I'll talk to you a bit later about our internal MBA program here at Learning Pool. So we've got an MBA program that we run that's been externally accredited by a business school. So you get a genuine postgraduate qualification at the end of it. But we're doing that. And later this year, I'm going to try and expand this to the whole company in the form of a skills allowance to try and take everybody that's in my organization through a skills program of some sort. And honestly, as a CEO of a tech business, I don't care what it is that you do in this area. I think the act of improving yourself, of me having the opportunity to invest in you improving, it doesn't matter whether it's knitting or coding. I think the act of somebody being on a journey to improve themselves will put them in the right frame of mind to think about how flexible, how open to change they are, and how they might apply those ideas back to my organization. I think people learning is good, and I don't honestly care from moment to moment what it is they're doing. What I care is that they're in the right mindset to do it. Of course, skills is dominating the post-pandemic agenda. It wouldn't be a Donald H. Taylor webinar without a Donald H. Taylor reference. And so here we have his global sentiment survey result. You see number 1, reskilling, upskilling. Number 6, interesting though, skills-based talent management coming in number 6 there, brand new. I think Donald will pitch in on the chat here, but I believe that's pretty unusual to see something come from nowhere to make it into the top 10. Is something that I think is worthy of taking note. So, and I'm sure Don will pitch in with a thought around how this chops and changes. It is only a sentiment survey. It is not the absolute there, but it certainly has the zeitgeist. People are feeling this all over the place. We should be doing more in skills. Thanks, Don, in the chat. So at Learning Pool, we break down what we do into 3 kind of buckets. We help organizations who have issues in compliance, issues in onboarding, and issues in upskilling. And we use a single piece of technology, what we call the Stream Learning Suite, to do all 3. I think that's really important, because if you have to deploy lots of different bits of technology all over the place, it becomes really burdensome. It becomes a huge resource drain on the organization. So being able to reconfigure and redo what it is you need from your tools in a single provider, we think gives us a competitive difference, frankly. But today I'm focusing on this bit. What are the typical problems that companies are trying to solve via skills? And so for me, the typical problems that I hear are aligning talent with strategy. We've got this strategy, this is where we want to be, but talent isn't there. So either we need to make some hard choices around redundancies or moves, or actually we need to think about how we're going to move some people. That's an increasingly common story at the moment. And as people look at the labor market, they've very little interest in putting hundreds of job adverts out. Of course, everyone has always wanted to reduce unwanted attrition in the organization. And I think this agenda, the skills agenda, is certainly being seen as a major way to do that, especially in the face of potentially rampant wage inflation that is difficult for a business to keep pace with without completely shooting itself in the foot. And no doubt the folks at Amazon and Walmart and Target aren't completely selfless in what they're doing there. They think this is going to pay off big time for their organization. For me, I think it pays off big time. I had my HR leader, Michelle, run the stats here. I think it costs me about 50 grand every time somebody leaves, and I have to reskill somebody. I have to recruit somebody else to put in their place. When I take into account the time I lose and everything like that, It varies with role, obviously, it varies with tenure, but it's 50 grand. Postgraduate qualifications like 5. This is an absolute no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. And of course, your ability to respond quickly to whatever comes next is fundamentally tied to your ability to build capability and to reskill and upskill people in your organization. What I like to do here is to think about how we can make it more personal. I did a TED talk many years ago around this idea of the 2 sigma problem. This is the idea that a C student can be made into an A student through the personalization of learning. This was something that Benjamin Bloom found in a paper called the 2 sigma problem, which is a fascinating look. It's still 30, 40, 50 years ago. I can't even remember. It's old, but it's a problem that we know the answer to. We know how we can get C students, C grade students into A grade students. We personalize. We do one-to-one tutoring. We coach, we mentor, but we can't do it for everybody because we just don't have the scale. We don't have the capability, the capacity to do it. And so this is where technology for me has always been a lever. The idea that technology could help with that personalization, and that better, more personalized learning experience comes from a result of the right content with the right data and the right measurement and the right personalization. So if I can get that data behind the scenes on what it is you know, what you don't know, what it is you want to do, what your job requires you to do, and I can personalize both the content and the experience to you, that's always my goal. This is a somewhat holy grailish view of the world. It's very difficult to do, and it's a continuous journey. But it's certainly what I'm looking to do with Learning Pool itself and with Learning Pool's customers, is to think about how can we make the experience more personal. So I'm just going to do a couple more slides and I'm going to pause for a moment to do another conversation. I've talked a bit about data there, and I think this, for me, part of what underpins this skills capability is that the first thing that I wanted to do at Learning Pool was to understand what are the skills, what have we got, and how do they matter. Now, this is a generic looking skills dashboard. This isn't Learning Pool's one. I'll come to that in a moment. But this is the sort of visualization, and this is the sort of analytics that I'm using to understand the skills that are in our organization. And I'll talk about how we collect this data and things like that. But the idea of trying to understand what are the top skills in the organization by who exhibits them, thinking about this is just an end user evaluation. How does that break down by department? How does that break down in terms of the strengths and weaknesses within that department? So my commercial team in this example, pretty weak on digital, not very resilient. Salespeople, not resilient. Who'd have thought? Whereas they are very strong at building relationships, at customer focus. So I need to do some analysis at this point to understand whether my sales team being weak at digital is truly something that's holding me back, or whether actually I can cope with that. Should I build on my strengths? Should I build on my weaknesses? And how the different teams vary in their skill evaluation from department to department. And thinking about how we improve over time, the ability to take snapshots of how people are performing in specific skills at different points in time. This is an important capability. So this little graph shows, red shows where we have a poor evaluation. The company is generally not so good at it. Gray is kind of mediocre and green is good, and it goes from left to right in time. So time, hopefully we build our skills as we go along. This is just a generic look at this, but this is the sort of data I'm expecting to see from any skills gap analysis or from any piece that sort of tries to understand what it is our people can do when they start in our business. So I'll pause for a moment because I talk incredibly fast. I apologize to anyone who's non-native on English. I'm a nightmare. Who owns the skill agenda in your organization, if anybody, if there is a skills agenda?
I'm laughing because it doesn't matter if you're a native or a non-native speaker, Ben. You do have to concentrate to keep up with you, which is great because we don't want to be bored. You want to sit forward, learn new stuff, hang out with somebody who's smart, saying interesting stuff. And I think this is a great question. Who owns the skills agenda? And if there isn't a skills agenda, please let us know, because it may be there is one, but it's got a different name, or it may be, there isn't a skills agenda at all. In a lot of public sector organizations, there do tend to be skills agenda. So far, Ben, we've got 2 answers, and it looks like it's distributed. Stephen saying heads of department, and Emma saying senior leaders. And Kevin says, though, I'm not sure anyone has grasped this. And I think that's not at all unusual, actually. I think it's more unusual, Kevin, for there to be an explicit skills agenda. And Yvonne is saying it looks like it's quite distributed across people development and managers and individual employees themselves. Giovanni says it's a developing concept, which is being led by senior leaders. Is this a sort of, it's quite an interesting distribution of ideas, Ben. Is that what you're expecting?
Yeah, I mean, if you actually go for this big time, it's a massive change.
Yeah.
Because there is this idea that, there's a career path for you, isn't there? One is a junior associate product manager who becomes a product manager, who becomes a senior product manager, who becomes a principal product manager, who becomes the head of product management, the director of product management. That is your life journey. But actually, if you turn that around and take a skills look at it, so what are the skills of an associate product manager? Well, they're a good communicator, they are resilient, they are a problem solver, and so on and so forth. And you start to look at that and say, well, as my career as an associate product manager progresses, I go from a level 1 at these things to a level 2 to a level 3. What job needs level 3 problem solving, communication, and something else? Well, it might not be a product manager. It could be something else completely at that point. And I think it's kind of interesting because we've always been on these predetermined career paths in a certain way, that one will go from here to here to here. And there's lots of that. My wife works in the NHS, and there are career paths there. And there are lots of organizations where that's true, and it's a profession, and it's tried and tested and has good reason. But there's such ambiguity in everything we do here that the idea that I'm ever going to get to a point where I've mapped out everybody's career in my organization is a nonsense. Like, I'll never get there. And so that sort of thought that I'm going to do the old school competency mapping or whatever and then forward, and that was the classic of what we used to do 15 years ago, is sit down for a very long chat that lasted about a year about job descriptions, competency mapping, and things like that. And then we did it again the next year because it had changed. But I think if you start to look at that as a skills agenda and say, hey, actually, you have to think about career paths totally differently now in this organization, because what somebody can do here will actually be really useful for this emerging thing over there. That's a massive change. It's very rarely something that L&D can do, because frankly, it changes everything.
A lot of different angles on the question coming through, Ben. And Joe has said maybe the next question is who should own the skills agenda. I'll leave it to Ben to answer that. I think what you're describing is this shift from a way in which we understand what people can do through the proxy of a role. So you fit into a box, which is you are a role, and that's on a ladder, of describing those roles in a much more elemental way, if you like. We break it down into constituent parts. The role is made up of these tasks, which require these skills. But if you have those skills, then yes, they can be matched to other roles and other tasks elsewhere in the organization. It's something people have been talking about for a long time. I think we finally got to the stage where technologically it's possible. Well, technologically, the promise is that we can do it. Whether we can or not do it, I think depends on a lot of other factors. And that's actually what number 6 on the Global Sentiment Survey was about, skills-based talent management, the idea that it's possible to do this. It's definitely very much in the news at the moment and in people's thinking. What I'm very interested in these answers, Ben, is how we have a wide range of people being involved, but very often it's not L&D, it is managers or department heads. So I'm going to ask you Joe Cook's question: who should own the skills agenda in an organization? Thank you, Joe. For the question.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Geez, drop me in it. I don't know is the answer to that, I guess, Don. But my take on it is that it's owned at the top. Like the actual adoption of a new way of doing something here needs C-suite buy-in in terms of, yes, we will reorientate our organization around this. But then you have to empower learning and development to do something differently. Because if you're still coming down the pipe and ordering courses on specific job roles or on specific things, then that the way in which this aligns is totally wrong. So if we're going to change that agenda there, I have to be able to look at it and say, well, what's really important to me over the next 1 to 2, 3 to 5 or whatever, and then structure out an L&D strategy around that and think about how I build my capability to respond quickly to someone who needs a new skill, as opposed to a particular course or piece of knowledge or something else like that. So I think it changes quite drastically what it is we do. And I think we've been kind of crying out for it, frankly, in L&D, the movement from courses to resources, 70-20-10, everything that's inside, everything that's been in the thought leadership movement over the last 15 years has been, how can we be more agile? And so I think if you've got that top level buy-in, then you need L&D to really get on board with this more agile approach to how we respond. And you have to have the authority to say no to things that people do down the line, because actually that's not the way we're going to do this from now on. I'm going to understand the skill, and sometimes I'm going to insource it and do it ourselves, and sometimes I'm going to outsource it. And that will depend on the cost and the urgency that things need to be done with. So I think it's kind of L&D becomes your partner in crime, and this is why I think it's that journey to extraordinary, because all of a sudden you aren't the one that's being informed of the strategy and could we implement it. You're the one that's perhaps got access to that skills data and is talking to the C people who are saying, well, skills are very important. You're like, yeah, but if I understand our strategy correctly, we should be here on digital skills and we're not. And actually, we really need to make an intervention here in the commercial team, because their digital skills are nowhere, and this is going to hold us back. This is going to be one of the reasons why we miss sales targets. That would be a total change around from us taking orders to us giving orders in the L&D department and saying, actually, I can tell you where you're short because I've got the data.
Ben, I love this. This is my meat and drink. I could talk about this all day long. You have something like 20 more slides. We have something like 20 more minutes. We need to press on.
Fine. I probably should give you 5 minutes back at the end as well. What a total lie. Thank you, guys. I will come back and review everything you said. So thank you for your participation. I do appreciate it. Let me show you what I've done for a moment, because it's difficult. This is somewhat ethereal. So let me get a bit more practical with you for these last few slides to show you what we're doing here at Learning Pool. It's easy to show you what I'm doing because, hey, I can give it away. It's always difficult to get on the inside of clients. So one of the first things we did is we made a very quick decision about a framework of skills that we thought would be generically applicable across the organization. So we use sources like McKinsey and the World Economic Forum to come up with what notionally we called our sort of future skills. These are the things that I'm keen to invest in, and I think we need to be strong in as an organization. You can do this in lots of different ways. You can take an ontological approach. So you can take, with those talent tools that exist out there are set up to tell you the skills that are probably needed given any job role. So you can take this massive crowdsourced bottom-up approach with machine learning and lots of fancy tech to tell you the sorts of skills you can have. You can go through a relatively in-depth exercise. In this case, I did something quite basic. I came up with what would typically be more soft skills or power skills as they're coming to be known, and think that actually it doesn't really matter where we are here. I'm going to need some of this, and that actually some of them will be more important than others. So service orientation, for example, down there, Learning Pool is famous for its customer service. We're the only company, for example, that has a first line support function for learners. So anybody who buys platform from us, their end learners can actually pick up the phone and speak to Learning Pool. Our call center will help them directly. Nobody does that. That's crazy. Service orientation is a big part of what we do. It's a big part of my strategy. So I'm expecting people to be good at it and to get better at it. So we picked out 5 levels, and we changed some of the names of these based on some of the things that were relevant. So in certain areas, you were a diplomat if you were a very good negotiator, as opposed to advanced or expert. But they're basically achieving 5 levels, and then there's a definition in terms of what it is you can do based on the level that you are. And that's how we start to link things back in terms of the skills and the levels that are required for different jobs in Learning Pool, in terms of how much autonomy you can act with and what your knowledge and your position with others looks like. So then we took them through a short process to get some diagnostics from them. There's an onboarding tool built into our learning experience platform Stream that just gets a bit more information about what it is people do, what their ambition is. One of the things we're trying to understand is how far some people want to go versus others. Some people want to change their jobs completely. They want to pivot. Some are looking to be promoted. Some are just happy in their role. So we shouldn't be making recommendations to people that are at odds with their current state of mind. We think about a short list of skills that they should have a look at given their position. And then we also sent them through a self-assessment based on those skills in terms of how they were doing. This was a self-assessed way of looking at skills. The next level up would be manager-led. The final level up would be assessment-led. In this case, I was looking to do something quickly to get an analysis of what was out. So I went with the self-analysis. And based on that, you'd end up with this is our internal learning experience platform here at Learning Pool Stream. I end up with different things from our skills builder of stuff that I might want to concentrate on to help me improve in the areas that matter both to me and to the company. But let me show you an experiment that we did, because behind each one of these playlists is, different pieces of recommended and kind of core content. So core content that will help you get up in talent development, recommended listening, things like podcasts, videos, articles, things like that, and lots of different pieces of learning content. So this is a piece of learning content around 70-20-10, for example, that we put our own staff through to make sure that they're up to speed with what it is people are thinking back in the learning industry. But what I wanted to know was whether this actually worked, because this is kind of typical of what happens in the learning experience platform era of things. You go through a self-assessment of some sort of platform onboarding, you get it personalized a bit, and then good things happen, apparently. So I made an experiment. We made 3 groups. Group A would go through the normal sort of expectation of what we do here. They get assigned playlists. So based on that personal journey, that assessment of their skill and what it is they wanted to improve on, we'd assign them a series of playlists of things that they should be thinking about working on. And inside each of those were those core topics and those recommended additional topics. Group B didn't get anything assigned. They just went through that process, and then they got nudge emails. So instead of being assigned something on a learning experience platform, we made it more learning in the flow. Now, we could have done this on Slack or Teams. We chose email on this occasion. And this idea was that once every day or every 2 days, you would get a nudge email that said, hey, have you reviewed this? Have a look at that. But they weren't involved in any sort of playlist or progression. So it was just kind of a one hit. Here's an article, here's an article, here's an article. And then finally, Group C came in and got both. So they went through that process. They were assigned some core content that they might want to look at. They were given the nudge emails, and the nudge emails worked with the assigned content to mean that once you got back to the platform, once you'd looked at that article, it told you what to do next because you had been assigned some things to do from there. So any guesses how this worked out? We had roughly 150 people each in these groups, or something like that, as we assign them around the business. So Group A, the playlists, about 130 people in that, I guess. Group B, the nudge emails, a few more, 180 odd in that. And Group C, both, just over 150, 160 people assigned to that. So what do we think? This is just an engagement figure that it came out with here, but it's kind of fascinating. What do you think the difference is between viewing in these groups? So Group A did chuff all. When they went through, that's an official British phrase you could use, by the way. If you go through this onboarding, bear in mind, I run an LXP company, and this is our LXP. So I'm kind of hopeful that people are doing things well here. If we go through that onboarding and then say, hey, look, you should do this. Yeah, they don't. That was kind of interesting. Group B, nudging emails, they did more. So getting into the flow a little bit, we certainly got more. And Group C, in terms of they got both. Okay, this is where the magic's at. So that ability that we're not just saying you should do this, then we're reminding them on an almost daily basis. Hey, Kevin, you said you'd want to get better at this. This is an area you need to get better. Here's an article that'll help you. And then when you got there, here's the next, and here's the next. That sort of started tripping people down a journey of learning. And I mean, this is relatively basic. I'm sure this is not a great revelation or insight, but it was interesting to me. Like, boy, you've got to do a lot of work here in order to get this self-directed sort of more skills-based learning going. It's not enough just to analyze somebody's skills and say, off you pop into the distance. You're going to have to support them, build programs, nudge them, and get them going through this sort of thing. So how we actually start to, this really shapes our opinion in terms of how we advise our customers. It's not enough just to assign stuff or to even be self-assigned. You have to go an awful lot further to get a little bit further there. And then I also look at this. This is my overall structure across the business. So going back to that piece in my stream analytics dashboard here to understand the skills gaps in here. So at the top, I have the self-declared declared skill level. So this is how good people thought they were at the top graph. And the bottom graph is how many people selected that skill. So, you look at the top graph. I guess what I took from that is that I'm not very differentiated. pleasingly, I'm quite high in service orientation, which I wanted to be. I'm low in entrepreneurship. But I think overwhelmingly, I'm just not very differentiated. So from a strategic point of view, I think I need to work with Tracy, my L&D manager, to think about those skills that are more important than others to the future of my business, especially in the next 0 to 2 years, and think about how we can increase skill levels to their maximum in certain areas here. Of course, I need to validate all of this as well. Everyone thinks they're great until you start doing 360 stuff, and then the truth comes out. So I need to go a little bit further than that base level of self-assessment. One of those interesting things, though, is down there. Look at that, skills selected. So when people were given a choice of what it is they wanted to do, and they selected into the skills, like literally the bottom one is service orientation. Now, we're pretty good at this, as is demonstrated by the self-assessment above, but I've got some work to do here, because this is one of the most important parts, one of the hallmarks of my strategy. And whilst we are good at this, probably better than any of our competitors, if we're going to create that as clear blue water and continue a trend of Learning Pool being an organization that is known for service, then I need to get more people interested in learning more and in doing more as we go through this. So this is a real call to action. You know, you look at the big ones there: critical thinking and leadership. Everybody wants to be the sort of the C-suite leader or something like that, which is great in principle. But I mean, I can tell you from being sat in this seat, I don't do much critical thinking, and my leadership is, you know, subpar at best. So, you know, service orientation is actually what I need from people here. I need to make some changes in my company to do that. So one last bit that I'll check on, because I'm running out of time for you here, is, okay, so look, you've got a result like that. So what are you going to do about service orientation? What are you going to do about that to mean that we've done this analysis? We understand where we're weak, where we're strong, where we need to focus. We understand that I can use that self-directed and that nudging approach to get people viewing content and doing more. But what if I really need to make a change? What if it's urgent? What if I actually need to be a little bit more deliberate about it? The sort of approach that I've been a big fan on for a long time, and that is coming back into vogue. If you stick around in learning and development long enough, everything comes back around. It's cohort-based learning. Now, this is old school, because this is what we used to do in business school when we were face-to-face 20 years ago. And we did lots of it online in forums and things like that. But now cohort-based learning is coming back. And frankly, I never thought it went away. I was always a big fan. This is one of the things we've done. So we create modules of cohort-based learning. So small groups of people going through specific modules on specific skills topics to see what they can do to integrate and apply new ideas and increase their skill level. So this one is called Designing for the Customer. There's a playlist of stuff here. It's just in stream again, of things that they can work through. Some of this is content we've made, but actually in this screenshot, none of this content is stuff we've made. This is stuff we've curated, because there's so much good content out there about how we can design services for the customer. I don't need to make content. What I need to do is curate a good playlist of things that we're hearing in an instructionally sound way, and then I can get people talking about it. So if I click on one of these objects, then I get content on the left. This is a pretty boring piece of text. Doesn't really matter to me here because it's good content. And on the right, I facilitate a conversation about it. Does Learning Pool fail to answer any of these questions? Do we do any of this stuff? And then people coming in. These are real people who really work for me, coming in, having conversations and thinking about how they integrate new ideas into their ways of working. And at the end of each module, we ask for an assignment of some sort from the group. And it can be a short thing. So in this case, it's just a question that you can explore and you can see other people's responses. Others are more formal. So for example, my change playbook that I've distributed around the organization came out from one of these modules. A group of people got together and wrote a change playbook. It's 20 pages, it's beautiful. It says how change is the normal here at Learning Pool, and that actually this is what you need to do if you need to get on board with change. So, you know, this is a bit whistle stop, and I apologize that we've kind of gone through a few bits. Let me bring it full circle for you as we come towards the end of our time together. You know, that module is part of that MBA that I talked about at the start of the show here. Anybody who's been through that, we've had 100% people pass through that, and it is externally accredited and assessed. So 100% of people in my company that have undertaken that have got through it and got a postgraduate qualification, and every single one of them that's been through the cohort-based learning approach has stayed. Every single one of them. And maybe that's indicative of their buy into the company, maybe it's indicative of something else, but I've seen phenomenal results, and it's early days. The data and things that I've shown you here is all stuff we've done in the last 6 to 12 months. So we need a bit more time before we can really say what's going on and get really deep into that next step, which is measuring whether or not we're having that real difference. My headlines are, I think I'm probably making an effect, but I need to be better at measurement. I need to go again and understand what we're doing in 12, 24 months time to understand whether I'm really making a difference. There's a handy ebook you can download here on measuring training effectiveness, which is one of our pieces we've done with Brandon Hall Group in the USA to help me think about what I'm going to do to take it to the next level. Don, thank you ever so much for your time today. Thank you everybody for participating. There's a ton of questions there, which I won't get to here, but I will take them offline, and perhaps we'll find a way of getting them to folks. I'm happy to take one or two, Don.
Ben, it is always a delight to host you because you get this combination of theoretical framework, way of looking at things, practical experience, insight, and all conveyed superbly. As Sarah says, great session. Thank you, Ben. Also, Anne-Marie, Kevin, Joe, Barry, all picking up on your comment about things going around and coming back again. Absolutely. And in fact, I'm thinking about going and buying myself a kipper tie and a pair of flares shortly for presenting in. Let's get through as many of these as we can. I'm going to go from the top on the questions here. Kelly said, do you ever see examples of industries or companies at each of those levels of the 4 levels? I mean, we don't need to go with the bottom level, but at the top of the exceptional level, IHG, Amazon, would you say those are companies that are doing extraordinary things?
Yes, they are for sure, but some of them have extraordinary resources. So it's not evenly distributed, and I've seen extraordinary examples from folks that turn up at the Learning Technologies conference and present from the stage there. I think you'll find you get quite a few of those people who are capable of doing extraordinary things from time to time, whether they're systematically capable or whether they get there because of 1 or 2 people's going way above and beyond of what they should have done of their job. I think that's the difference. So someone like Amazon is making it a system in terms of how they do it, but they employ 250 instructional designers. They are learning experience designers. They've got hundreds of these people around the place. They've got unbelievable resources. So I think you can look for bright sparks in companies. Certainly at the LT conference, I see them all the time on the main stage talking about these things and getting to it. But it is those larger, more resourced organizations that are doing better. I've seen lots of smaller tech companies doing this quite well as well. And hopefully I'm putting Learning Pool in a position to be one of those.
Yeah. Lisa says, good session, theoretical and practical. And she also talks about your business, Ben. When I toured the Learning Pool office, I think you've changed offices since, but when I toured the Learning Pool office in Derry, I was really impressed by the fact that the support people were sitting right next to the salespeople. And that's something when you walk around an office, it's a telltale sign for me that, as you say, caring about your customers and really looking after them, it's not just something you talk about, it's something that really happens. Let's go to Asi, raises a really good point about skills. We're all talking about skills, but are we talking about the same thing? So look, we could spend the next 2 hours talking about it. Can you give us a very quick boiled down view of what you think we're talking about when we're talking about skills? Because people use big buckets like creativity, which honestly is nonsense. That's not one skill. The example Asi uses is problem solving. Is that a skill? I don't think it is. I think it's a combination of different things. How wide, how narrow should we go in our definition of skills to make the sort of approach you're talking about work, Ben?
So, I mean, broadly speaking, I'd say that skills are specific learned abilities that are transferable in some way. That's my sort of definition. And then I'd take a competency as the ability to apply that to a specific thing. So problem solving, if I become competent in a job role that requires a certain degree of problem solving. So I think there's a difference there. I think is it flavor of the month? Yeah, I mean, totally. I've been relatively skeptical here because, again, everything's cyclical and it comes back with a new name. But I have a slight hope on this one, and it's more than a slight hope, that if organizations genuinely change the way they think about employing people, and if people think about the way that they will change jobs, and you get that real mobility, that it does actually change as a result of this. Now that involves a very big wholesale shift, and it might not be that we all agree on the same currency there, So I think you do end up looking at, the machine learning way of doing this is kind of interesting, because what you're actually asking algorithms to do here is to pull out skills from job descriptions and various things like that, and create synonyms.
I'm going to ask you not to go down that route, because there's two things there. There's definition, and then, well, how do we get to it? I believe it's a very complicated business using algorithms for it. I think the definition bit, I think that's going to be market led. I don't think there's any doubt that eventually skills will become the currency of people's employment. As he said, look, Miriam's work, he was thinking, I've dropped Miriam's blog into the chat. Please go and check it out. She's really smart. She thinks about these things in great detail. We have just completed mapping our own internal skills, says Asi. So he's up for it. And he's talking about developing a marketplace. Absolutely. That definition is good. Let's go on, Stephen. I'm trying to get through as many questions as possible, Ben. Please, on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got all those resources, but do download the book from Learning Pool, and you've got all those other resources that came up as well. Stephen says, the skills analysis, is that an in-house tool? So I'm trying to get away from do you do it by machine? How do you know what skills people have got, Ben, and also what skills you need? Very quickly, in like 1 minute. I know it's impossible.
Yeah, so I talked about 3 levels, really, in terms of how we do this. One is a self-assessment, and that could be as simple as a Likert scale in terms of how well you do things compared to something. It might be that you try and ask people for examples of how they do it, and probe a little bit deeper and come up with a model of what that score is. I quite like asking somebody to reflect on how good they are and how good everybody else is at the same time. So you get this sort of gap between, well, I'm a 4, but everybody else around me is a 2, and you can use that to sort of suggest, well, actually, if everybody's a 2, then it's very unlikely you're a 4, given here, and you get that as a view across the whole organization. Beyond that, I would use somebody who's kind of thought to have the skill at a higher level to judge you, which is typically a manager or a supervisor, someone with more experience. So you start getting into a more of a 360 view, and beyond that, you have a more formalized assessment. So that is the idea that actually I'm going to give a test in some respect, which might be an on-the-job thing, or it might be a written piece. And I think you get a better result the more of those you can do. It becomes more reliable. You're hard pushed to pivot your whole organization around somebody saying, "Yeah, I'm a 4," but you might be more used to doing that around something that was more algorithmically or assessment driven, especially with a bit of peer-to-peer in it.
We've hit 11 o'clock. We can't get to Lisa's question. I think we've partly answered it, and Caleb's question about how do you select leaders of teams. I'm a great believer that you start with self-assessment, but I've also dropped a counter argument. Most people think they are a better than average driver. If you've got an equal distribution, that can't possibly be the case. And so we have to have, as you were saying, Ben, a combination of different methods in order to get close to it. I'm very, very wary. I just want to say this, very wary about anybody being able to put somebody's emails through a machine and come up with a hard and fast objective view of their skills of something, which some people claim to be able to do. And I think it's a very dangerous approach. It's not your approach. Look, we are at 11 o'clock. We have to stop. I want to say a big thank you to the people who are with us. I want to say a big thank you again to Ben Betts, CEO of Learning Pool, who brings that combination of business expertise, learning expertise, and delivery expertise to a great webinar. Ben, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
No, thank you ever so much for your hosting today. Thanks to LSG for bringing us together, and thanks to everyone who took part for your great contributions, great questions. Do look me up on LinkedIn if you wish to connect with me. I'd be delighted. Do download the ebook and check out Learning Pool at learningpool.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I'll drop that URL back into the chat so you can download that digital book. And do check out Ben on LinkedIn. And Kelly's just put it all in caps. Brilliant. Thank you. I agree, Kelly. I agree. And I'd love to keep the conversation going. So please do get in contact with Ben on LinkedIn, because he's one of the guys, one of the people well worth knowing in this field, because he's smart and generous, and he does know what he's doing. Brilliant. All right, going to wrap up now. I'm going to put everyone into a holding position, and we will see you, I hope, for the next webinar, which won't be until September the 22nd. So in the meantime, have a good summer if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. If you joined us from Australia, as I know one person did, I can't remember who, then have a good winter, and I look forward to seeing you again in September. Bye for now.